In this video, we're gonna talk about how to set up your Infiltrator and Shorty holsters. So the holster is gonna come without a clip installed. And the reason for that is we want you to really be able to adjust the holster to yourself and figure out how it needs to fit before you install that clip. And then that way you'll know how to adjust things once you've got it set up. So now let's talk about how to set up the Infiltrator and Shorty holsters for concealed carry. So if you're carrying behind the hip, the requirements are gonna be different than appendix carry. And we're gonna cover those here in a minute. But right now we're gonna cover how to set it up for appendix carry. So you wanna take the unloaded gun, put it in your holster, and then place it inside the waistband and move a little bit sitting down just to kind of see where it feels right. And this is gonna work mostly for comfort, but then you can also see how much grip you have on the gun, and it's gonna improve when you stand up as opposed to how much you get sitting down. Figure out what feels right, and then take a piece of masking tape, take the flat edge, and place it on the holster right where the clip locking is. So it sits right above the belt line. And that is going to be your starting place for getting the holster set up for appendix carry. Now let's go over setting it up for behind the hip carry. All right, so when you're adjusting the holster for behind the hip carry, cant is gonna be the most important thing. So you're gonna want to take the gun and place it back in behind your hip. Now, some people do like carrying it to 3 o'clock, but that is not comfortable because you've got a solid hip bone right there that the holster can dig into. Whereas if you move it back just a little bit behind the hip, it gets a lot more concealable and a lot more comfortable. So as you can see, I've got the holster back there, good cant. The gun sits nice and tight next to the body. Whereas if I make that a 0-degree cant, there's a lot of space in the gap between my body and the holster. So that's where you're gonna want more cant. Now, also remember, if you're carrying an optic on your gun, that optic's going to bottom out on the belt at some point. So you are not gonna be able to get as much cant out of the holster if you're carrying with an optic. So I just take a little bit of masking tape, place it over the clip blocking, and that's gonna figure out how you wanna adjust the holster. Now we can get to installing the hardware. So once you've got the hardware all set out, you're gonna wanna apply your Vibratite. So Vibratite is a thread locker, and unlike Loctite, you can use Vibratite multiple times with one application. You can use it normally 3 to 5 times. So you're gonna wanna take this thread locker, get out this little pillow pack, take your knife, cut a little slit in the top of it, and dip your screw in. And if you need to get a little more height on it, you can just press up using your fingers, twirl it around, get it coated on the threads, and then place it upside down on a paper towel and let it cure for 5 minutes. After that 5 minutes, you're good to go and assemble your holster. All right, so now that you've got the tape on your holster and you realize where it's gonna sit, you want to start installing the holster. And one thing to realize is the spacer itself is around a 1/2 inch in diameter. So if you want your clip to sit right there, you're gonna need to move the spacer higher than where the tape is so that the spacer itself sits right on top of the tape. Remember that when you're installing everything. So I like taking the screw and then placing it through the hole in the clip and then placing the spacer on because it gives a little more space for my thick belt. But another option you can do is placing the spacer on top of the clip and then placing the screw on top of the spacer so that the clip will sit closer to the holster itself, which makes it much tighter. So if you're running a thin belt, this is gonna be the way to go because it's gonna give you better engagement. Side note, you do need to run the spacer because if you do not have the spacer installed, the screw is gonna be long enough that it will stick through the holster and it could potentially scratch your gun. All right, so I've got the screw right here. I'm gonna place it through the clip, place my spacer in. I'm gonna remove the tape because I've eyeballed roughly where it's gonna go. I'm gonna place it through the top slot. Got my square nut, gonna place it on top of my index finger like this, push it up into that channel, press it up high so the channel captures the nut, and then I'm gonna hand tighten the screw in place. Now what I'll do is I'll take this spacer, keep the holster level so it doesn't slide anywhere, and then press it between the clip and the holster itself. I'm gonna drop that screw in just to hold it in place. And then again, take the square nut on my index finger, press it up, and start turning that screw until it catches, and then turn it by hand, get it adjusted as I want it, then go through and start tightening everything up. I tighten each side a turn or two before I really tighten it down. And I'm not gonna tighten it down that much yet because there might be some final adjustments I need to make. All right, so when you're making final adjustments on the hardware, all you really wanna do is loosen up just slightly, as long as you're staying within the same set of slots. If you go from the top slots down to the bottom slots, or you're canning the holster, you may need to take the hardware all the way out. But if you're just making a slight adjustment, most of the time you just need to loosen the screws up a little bit, and it's gonna give you enough movement that you can just move it slightly. And then once you have that movement done, go through and tighten everything up pretty good, and then go just make sure it's hand tight, but you're not gonna strip the screws. To take your Infiltrator or your Shorty holster and put it on really quickly, what you're gonna wanna do is get the bottom of the holster inside your waistband, and then take your thumb, press it on top of the clip while using your index and middle fingers to pull up on the bottom tabs of the clip, get it in place, and it's on. Now to take it off, you're gonna wanna place your thumb on top of the clip and then pull up with the other two fingers, and it's off. It's that simple and quick, guys. All right, guys, I hope this video has been helpful on how to set up your Infiltrator and your Shorty holsters. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us through the website. And remember, take charge and carry with confidence.